Todd Gurley says that he thinks that he should go number 1 overall for sure in your fantasy football draft this year. He says you could choose AB. You might choose Antonio Brown over me, but that's it. Only one, maybe Cam. Then he names off like 30 more players. But he says only those 30. Now, he just said Cam Newton and Antonio Brown. Those are the only guys that he thinks should go over him. Now, there are other running backs in the league. Yeah. You got Le'Veon Bell. You got Adrian Peterson. You got so many other guys that you could go with. This is a fascinating crop of running backs in the NFL right now, especially if the Cowboys can mimic what they did with DeMarco Murray with Ezekiel Elliott. Autoflex Leasing Fan Text 43733. Who do you think is going to be the top running back coming out of the NFL this year? Do you think Gurley has a point? Should he go number 1 overall in your fantasy league?
I love the confidence. I really do. And I think this guy is a stud, and I think he'll be really good in this league for a very long time. But when you talk about going number 1 in someone's fantasy, you're talking about a guy who's going to get you close to 100 yards a game, couple touchdowns, maybe some passes. And for me, there's still guys out there, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles will be coming back off injury, and he's a guy who people love in fantasy. Doug Martin's another guy who gets tons of touches in fantasy. So, I mean, I think he falls down the line a little bit. He had some periods towards the end of the season where he was kind of really disappointing as far as running and catching the ball. I mean, he had a couple games where he had 19 yards, 45 yards, 48 yards, 41 yards rushing with no touchdowns, 1 touchdown. So to say that you want a guy to be number 1 in your fantasy, I think he has to put in more production for a extended period of time before I say that he can, jump over a guy like Jamal Charles or Adrian Peterson or Doug Martin, someone who I know is going to get, or Le'Veon Bell, someone who I know is going to get the touches and are proven to get those yards across the board.
Man, what's fascinating to me is how many people are already starting to question whether or not the Cowboys' Ezekiel Elliott should be up there. The dude hasn't even taken a snap in the NFL yet, yet here people are trying to put him in place with guys, the Adrian Petersons and guys that we've been talking about here. That's fascinating to me. Whenever I was watching film last year going into it, I was watching Melvin Gordon, and I was like, man, this guy has all the tools. He's got the spin move. He's got the speed. He has great vision. And then he ended up in San Diego without the offensive line that even Gurley has. And Broadus and Jeff and KT kept saying, now watch how physical Todd Gurley is whenever he runs the football. Watch how physical, compared to Melvin Gordon, he can take on an NFL defensive back. He can take on a linebacker, and he's going to be able to get you extra yards where Melvin Gordon probably isn't going to be able to pick up those kinds of things for you. Whenever I look at these guys, Eddie Lacy might be one of those guys that has a comeback season for the Packers if that weight loss is real. But I'm looking at this and going, man, there are a lot of good running backs. Is Ezekiel Elliott going to have that much of an effect on what the Cowboys do this year?
My only pause with Ezekiel Elliott is this, because people are coming in and they're comparing him a lot to Gurley, of what he did last year, and they're saying this guy is a talented running back, and this offensive line definitely kind of gives you that confidence that he's going to run well. But I just want people to remember a certain thing. He's a number 4 pick, so they're going to give him a lot of carries. And they're going to start giving him carries in the preseason. His body for the last couple of years have been conditioned for 11, maybe 12, 13 games, depending on national championship playoff, stuff like that. So when you start looking at how Ezekiel is coming into the season, he's going to have 4 preseason games. And then you have, let's just say, the first 7 games of the year. That's 11 games. So by that time, his body's taken pretty much what it's been used to on the college level for the last couple of years that he hasn't been there. He's going to run to that rookie wall. And if you see the same thing happen to Todd Gurley, who did not play 4 preseason games, who did not play the first 4 weeks of the season, so he came in week 5 with fresh legs, and you see when he came in, his first game, he had 6 carries for 9 yards. Then he had 146, 159, 128, 133. And then from that point on, he only had 1 game where he had over 100 yards. He had an 89, 45, 66, 19, 41, 140 against Detroit, 48 and 83. So that tells me that body will eventually wear down. And if the Cowboys are planning on making him a workhorse, Ezekiel Elliott I'm talking about, we have to be a little bit cautious about that because he's going to hit a rookie wall. And this guy's going to be the number one pick in your fantasy. You're going to need him to be a stud the entire season. So maybe we just kind of hold off on Ezekiel a little bit and see what happens before, a year or so before you go and make him your number one pick in fantasy.
Dan Bailey is my only Cowboy in my fantasy.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, Kevin is all about Dan Bailey love. Just absolutely adores Dan, which I don't not adore him.
Right.
But I'm probably not picking him number one overall.
If Tony gets hurt, you want him number one overall.
Probably.
Yeah,
probably so. Because they're going to be kicking a lot
of field goals.
And Barry Church was talking about him, and he was talking about him with on Sirius, and he said he's definitely a three-tool player that can just play on every single down. Talking about Elliott, and that's what Broadus talked about. Is this guy can block? Mm-hmm. That's what Emmitt Smith was a blocker.
Right.
You didn't have a lot of that last year. You were hoping that you could get it from Randall or McFadden. What happens if it doesn't happen? You're going to end up with an injured quarterback. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. He looks fluid catching out of the backfield. It's hard to find a guy that can do all of those things and be that kind of a player. Now, Murray could catch the ball, and actually out of college was better pass catcher than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Mm-hmm. And occasionally they would throw to him. More often than not, they just said, hey, let's just run between the tackles. Let's run this zone offense.
Right.
And I learned a little more about how it works from you last year, and I learned a little more about it over this summer too. I kind of watched some film on the options they have when they're running this zone read offense. And from what I understand, Ezekiel Elliott has the vision and the understanding, the basics of what this offense is. Well, that's what Barry Church says is going to help. He says it helps out the defense a lot. It takes up our play downs by a lot. That also happened in 2014 with DeMarco Murray. He was punishing defenses, and we went 3 and out here and 3 and out there, and we were fresh in the fourth quarter. That's how we won all of our games. Before that season, I heard Tony Romo that he was questioned about running statistics, carries, and stuff like that. Should guys get a certain number of carries? It looks like teams get, they do this because of this. And Tony said, I want to see a statistic that shows me how many guys who get 20, 25 carries a game, how many of those carries come in the third and fourth quarter.
Right.
Because when teams are ahead and they can rely on handing it off to their running back and just letting him punish and take up 40 seconds at a time.
Right.
That's when a guy can really pad his stats and make it look that way. And that shows you what his offensive line and is capable of and what his team's done already to set them up for that moment. And that's a fascinating thing. And that's the ideal I think that Jason Garrett and this group want. They want to be able to do that. Get up 7 points, 15 points, whatever it takes, and let's just punish it with the running back for the rest of the game.
That's their only method of winning at this point in time. When you look at how decimated this defense is with suspensions, with releases, with injuries.
That defense scares the crap out of me now.
You want to do whatever you can to keep those guys on the sideline. And it also helps when that defense is on the sideline, that means that opposing team's offense is on the sideline. That they're not getting any rhythm. They haven't seen enough plays to kind of really formulate what they want to do. Because when you come into a game, you kind of every team coming to the beginning of the game with your first 15 to 20 plays. These are plays that you want to run because you're pretty sure that these plays are going to work in the game. But if you don't get a chance to run those 15 plays or run them in a consistent manner, then it's hard to say, okay, we're going to scratch this one. This one works. This one works. This one works.
Once you figure out something works, you can go after it all day.
You can run it 8 different ways. If I know that this works, this running to the right in this type of fashion works, well, I can dress it up any other way. I can motion to it. I can shift to it. I can line up in it. I can go out 11 personnel in it, 20 personnel or 10 personnel or 12 or 21. And you can get to that same play in that same formation out of many different ways, but you don't know if it works if you don't get a chance to run it. And so that's what that running the football, eating the clock, keeping that offense on the sideline where they can't find a rhythm, and now they're still trying to figure things out, and you're up 13 points.
For what you're saying right there, Jesse, go watch the Patriots. Go watch that offense and watch how many times they run a certain play before they figure out what the safety is going to do and whether or not they're going to use Gronkowski or Edelman to rip that defense apart all
I'll
day.
tell you a quick, and it'll be very quick. When I eventually left the Cowboys and went to the Patriots, we were watching film. And the game came up the year before where they beat us the last seconds, Aaron Hernandez in the back of the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Belichick, when people think he's a kind of a stoic, mean guy, is a really funny guy. And he points it out.
I don't believe it at all.
He really is. He points it out and he's making fun because I tackled Wes Welker really hard on the sideline. He's like, you don't take that. But then he goes to tell us, he said, we knew we were going to win that game. And I said, how? He said, we had our drive for the final game. We had that game plan 2 drives ago. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We knew exactly how we were going to execute it. All that mattered was us getting the ball back. And we knew we'd have a chance to do it in the last. He goes, and we had
a high-scoring game.
Yeah, he said, we knew we had the ball last, and we knew everything we wanted to do in that drive, and that's how they beat us.
That's how those coaches think, man. Whenever they got it figured out, they keep rolling. All right.